keep rolling today. I'm thinking maybe I'll try to do this pattern. Like, let's stick to this different pattern, into this different collection of notes this time. So after the jump, I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna add the fifth, and then I'm gonna go through the whole thing again, adding not just the third but the fourth modal half step fifth, and then I'll map this thing out, and then hopefully after the jump, that's my plan. And then I'm gonna go over here and warm up, get the coffee flowing, and I'm gonna try to noodle around this time with a similar idea, but I'm gonna try to stick to the a different collection of notes. So now I'm on collection of notes around 6 o'clock. That's going to be D major collection of notes. And then I have the same pattern I was working on before, but now it was pushed up, right? The pattern was over here. If this was 4 o'clock, the mixolydian is here, and if it's 6 o'clock, that just moves it up 2 ticks to the right, 2 ticks to the right. So that's here. Now, the reason I'm working on this collection of notes is because it's around A major, and I like to play kind of the bluesy thing between A major. It's A mixolydian, right? So I kind of like going back and forth between A mixolydian and A minor. So I thought that would be another collection notes. So I'll try to do the same pattern. So if I memorize these diagonal patterns, then I should be able to apply them to any collection of notes, because the pattern's always the same. So it's not like I'm trying to break out of the one. It's all one shape at 4 o'clock to now be able to see it shifted up, which is kind of hard because now all the dots are shifted on the guitar. If it was a spreadsheet, it's all the same. All the relative positions are the same. I'm doing the same thing I was doing yesterday, but now everything is shifted up to here, to what I would call 6 o'clock. All right, let me see if I'm in key. So theoretically it should be totally easy. Functionally, because of tactile finger, it's not easy, right? Okay. So let me see. So I'm gonna go over here, and I'm just gonna and I think this worksheet still. I should update the worksheet, but you have the worksheet available if you wanted to download the worksheet and the whole course, so you can check it out if you want. Anyway, so I'm gonna walk this one up here, and I was trying to think about different patterns as I walk it up. So I'm just gonna try to get the feel for it. I'm gonna try to do a one finger walk up. Same idea. I can use any finger, but if I'm doing diagonal pattern, I've discovered that one finger is probably the way to go. So it's hard for me to come up to this place and see it as a different collection of notes. So I'm just gonna try to get the feel for it, and then after that, I'm thinking once I get the feel for it, I want to play with basically like if I hit this one, when I get to here, I have double stops underneath this one. So I'd like to maybe I was thinking about last night how to play with like a bit of a bar to get a rhythm on all three of them, like here. So because like I say, there's always going to be one underneath it. So I could do sweep picking once I get up here and possibly hit these two. So I'm going to a downstroke to get both of them, or even add the one under it, or an upstroke. So I don't know. I'm going to play with that stuff. So let's just try to get the pattern down here. So 5, 6, 2, 3, 6, 7, 3, 4. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's just do the first 3 strings at a time. Okay, so now I'm going to try to say, okay, I kind of got my rhythm down. I was doing something yesterday, I can't remember. All right, I don't know. I can't remember what I was doing last night, but now I'm reaching up to the third on each of these. So I'm going. I'm going. So when I get to the 2, I'm reaching up. I'm sorry, the 7 right there with my pinky, and then when I get here, I'm reaching up to the 7, which is up here, pinky, which is the which is the 2. Up here, I'm reaching to the 7, which is nodal point 5. Up here, I'm reaching the 7, nodal point 6. Up here, I'm reaching the 7, which is nodal point 2, which I think kind of sounds cool. So now I'm just leading with the pointer and then throwing the minor 7, which happens to be on all of them because this is a minor node. It's 6 modal half step, 7th scale degree is a minor. This is a minor node, so it's 6 modal half step, 7th scale degree is a minor. This is a minor node. That's a Locrian, which also has a minor 7, and then that's a minor node. So I can kind of just throw in that as I shuffle through here. Let's try a joke break. Joke break. Let's see. All right, just a random joke. You know, a wise man once said that Americans love to celebrate every holiday with dancing dogs. You got to have dancing dogs in the celebration, you know, because now technically he didn't just say it once, the wise man. He said it all the time. The wise man said it all the time. But that doesn't work rhetorically. You can't, you know, because if you start a sentence with a wise man repeatedly said, for some reason people don't listen to that. They don't listen. You have to say a wise man once said, one time. He said it once, and for some reason that's more important. Apparently, wisdom only counts if it's a one-time drop, which is weird, you know, because even wise men could get something wrong if they only said it once in their entire life. Assuming the wise guy got wise when he was old, that means he only said it once out of like, you know, what is he like he could be like 300 years old if you're talking like an old school wise man or something. So maybe he sneezed halfway through the thought. Maybe he hadn't had his coffee yet. But if he said something like 100 times, tested it, ran experiments, you know. Look, I've studied this extensively. The dancing dogs make people happy. That's clearly stronger evidence, you know, than if he only said it one time, I feel like. So imagine if like the wise man presenting his research, he's like, ladies and gentlemen, we ran a controlled study. When the dancing dogs appear, the people smile. The people smile. And they feel a little safer. They feel a little safer because only haters would be mad would scowl at the dancing dogs, you know. However, when we banned the dancing dogs, the population became sad, confused, and highly susceptible to terrible ideas, you know, because we let the mean people kick out all the dogs. So the wise man concludes, for the stability of civilization, do not ban the dancing dogs. I don't care what they say. They're trying to take you down by taking the dogs out first. That's what they do. But somehow the phrase still comes out, a wise man once said. After all that research, it still comes out, a wise man once said. I said it more than one time, for crying out loud. I got evidence. No. What I want to hear is a wise man said it many times in front of witnesses after years of research with empirical evidence and a double-blinded dancing dog trial. That's what the wise man had here. He didn't just say it one time. He's got a whole bunch of stuff. That's the kind of wisdom that and I'm not saying that you can empirically test everything, okay? You got to rely on the wise man sometimes. But even then, you would think that you'd be looking for the phrases that the wise man said about stuff that you can't really empirically test, like more than once. Because he probably did say it more than once. And then by telling people that he only said it one time, then that seems, you're misrepresenting, man. I wrote a song about it.
You know, a wise man once said, Americans celebrate every holiday, and somehow every single time there's dancing dogs involved in the display. Now technically he didn't say it once, he said it constantly again and again, but that don't work rhetorically, so the phrase got shortened by men. A wise man once said, that's the magic line they spread. Drop it once and walk away like a thunderbolt from heaven's head. But if you said it all the time, studied it and wrote it down with a sentence like a wise man repeatedly said. People stop listening instantly, their brains go wandering off instead. You gotta say a wise man once said, like wisdom, some red lightning drop, one moment of enlightenment, then the research has to stop, which is weird if you think about it. Even wise men might slip once. Maybe he sneezed halfway through the thought. Maybe wisdom showed up late for lunch. Maybe he hadn't had coffee yet. Maybe his brain was still in bed. But we trust that one random moment more than 1,000 things he said. A wise man once said, that's the phrase we all defend. One dramatic statement and the conversation's at the end. But if he said it 100 times, ran tests and wrote the data, then read, that's not just wisdom anymore. That's peer review with dancing dogs instead. Imagine a wise man presenting charts. Ladies and gentlemen, we ran the trial. When the dancing dogs appear, the crowd breaks out in joyful smiles. But when the dancing dogs were banned, the data showed a tragic fog. People got sad and confused and started believing terrible blogs. So for the stability of civilization, this policy must remain. You never ban the dancing dogs unless you want societal brain drain. But somehow history shortens it down, like the research never spread, and the whole scientific presentation becomes one sentence. Someone said, a wise man once said once. Are you kidding me instead? No, I want to hear the real report, the kind of wisdom I'll defend. A wise man said it many times in front of witnesses and friends after years of research with charts and graphs to recommend. Empirical proof, a double-blind dancing dog experiment. Now that's the kind of wisdom that I'm willing to trust instead. Because if dancing dogs make people happy, let the record show the wise man said it again and again and again.
All right. Okay. Let's go back. Get to work. Get back to work. No one cares about this stupid joke. Okay. All right, back to work. So, let's see. Okay, so now I'm gonna say, I'm gonna add a third now, a second modal half step, third scale degree, and we're still mapping this out. So we're in the collection of notes at 4 o'clock, which means the collection of notes around the key of C. So that means that the 8th fret up, first string down from the ceiling, that's going to be our tonic, which happens to be a C. That's where the note 4 is located on the top string, one closest to the ceiling. And then if I go back to the pointer finger, that's going to be my Aeolian node. That means that this is going to be shape number 1, which you might call the Aeolian shape or the Ionian G shape. And we're looking at the string that's the second string down from the ceiling, which is the star of D, which happens to be hovering over the continent, Dorian continent, continent number 2, if we're looking at the 4 o'clock collection of notes around the key of C. So I've been building one at a time as a chord construction, meaning we skip every other, you might call it modal half step, or every other scale degree. But instead of making this the 1, so I have to make it the Dorian, I would have to make it like the 1 of the Dorian node, right? And then count up there. I'm just going to keep it as the Dorian, and then count like normal people would measure, which means that we're going to take every other note in the 7-note collection, which I'm calling modal whole steps, or every other modal half steps. All right, and so that means that if I'm on Dorian, for example, I'm going to take one modal whole step up to build a chord. That means it's going to be 2 modal half steps. So that means if I count it out, I don't need to make this the 1. I just say, well, I'm on Dorian node. That means it's going to go from 2, 3, 4 up 2 modal half steps up. That means it's going to go to the Lydian node, which we saw last time, which means that the Lydian is always the first modal whole step times 2 second modal half step plus 1, the third scale degree away from the Dorian. And it has a short distance of 3 notes away as opposed to 4 notes away. So now let's say we stack another one now. So now I'm going to stack another one, which means it's going to be 2 modal whole steps away from the tonic, which is the Dorian. So 1 modal whole step was going here, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to go 4, 5, 6. That means it's going to be nodal point number 6 in the collection of notes, which is the Aeolian continent. I'm also defining this as a leaned forward chord because I'm defining the quadrant, 4 quadrants around this node, and we're leaning forward, which and it's defined by where the second modal half step or third scale degree is, because that's the main flavor of a chord, which is down here. So that's going to be our normal chord shape for most people. Would be a bar chord. If we hold everything down, it's going to look like an A minor bar chord from a caged system, but we're just building it one note at a time as we construct it. So now we're going to say, all right, so that's fine. So now we have nodal point 6. So that means nodal point 6 should always be Dorian's second modal whole step times 2 Dorian's fourth modal half step, which makes sense because if you count it up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you get to 6, right? So then, and if you add 1, it would be the 5th scale degree, which makes sense because if you say that's not a 2, no, it's a 1, and then I'm going to count it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Then if it was a 1, then you'd have to count it up this way, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'd have to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? If you don't make that the 1, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So why make that the 1? I don't know. I think it's to torture people. Is the basic premise of it, you know? Because if you can't, if they made it easy, then you'd be able to figure it out. And the old school teachers that had the stick that they hit your knuckles with and stuff, they wouldn't get to hit your knuckles as much if they made it easy. So they made up this thing where you had to renumber everything, so you can't remember everything because it's way more complicated. So they can hit your knuckles when you. That's my theory. But anyways, that means that it should be the second modal whole step, fourth modal half step, fifth scale degree is going to be a long distance 7 notes away. So it's 7 notes away. So I can see that here, right? It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a long distance, which you might call a perfect distance, as opposed to a short distance, which would be 6 notes away. The only one that's going to have a 6 note away distance, if you count from that node, would be the Lydian. Would be the Mixolydian node. So that means that the fourth modal half step, 5th scale degree is a very stable distance because, or in part, it has the same distance from every node that you would measure from, except the Locrian node. Okay, so there's going to be our lean forward chord, and we're starting to build basically that A shape. But I only need these 3 notes to build a chord. Everything else is a repeat. If I can hit that one. Now, what would I call that? Normal naming convention would be a D minor. But if I'm in the, but I would like to, but the D minor indicates, would say, well, I'm not sure where I am. I could be on the Aeolian, the Dorian, or the Phrygian and still be in the collection of notes and call it a D minor. People that are advocating for the system would say, well, that's good. The ambiguity is good because then you can stack on top of it. But to my thinking, it's like, no, it's not as good because I'd like to tell people where I am exactly and how I'm thinking. So I would like to call it a Dorian note. I'd like to say I'm thinking of myself at collection of notes 4 o'clock, and I'm thinking of that as the Dorian node. Is the same relative positions from the Dorian node the same as they would be from the Aeolian node? Like if this was the Aeolian node on the same string, wouldn't it be the same thing? Yeah, it would, but the same relative positions would be there, but it's a different shape. This would be leaning forward into shape number 4, and this is leaning forward into shape number 1, right? It's not the same shape, right? So you kind of so I think, and the mysteriousness is what attracts people, because then people can say, yeah, but I can trick people then by saying that it's like a minor, but I haven't revealed that the difference on the Dorian node, which is like the 6, to show people that it's a Dorian and not a minor. And it's like, well, that's cool. You can still do that. But if you're trying to write it down, you kind of want to tell people like what you're thinking, right? It makes a difference. It makes a difference if you're looking at it here, like it's a Dorian, or if you're looking at it as though it was this shape, which would be an A, right? Even if it's the same 3 notes, it kind of makes a difference. Like it would be nice to tell people a little bit more specifically, right? So, I mean, if you name it by nodal point, I would say it would be like it's at 4 o'clock, and it would be a Dorian 2, meaning it's 2 modal whole steps to get to the end point. So you say 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can name it by point, right? 2, 4, 6. Whereas that one isn't like this one. This is 6, 1, 3, right? If you name it by point, it's different, right? You could make this 6, 1, 3 and treat it as an Aeolian nodal point. That would be different, in my thinking, to think of it as a 2, 4, 6, meaning same relative distances, but it's a Dorian point because that's where I am on the planet. It's a whole different continent. It's a whole different continent if you say it's Aeolian, okay? So that's, okay, I feel like that's clear. I feel like that's obvious. I don't know why. Okay. So in any case, what if I want to make that Dorian like the Ionian, let's say. So we want to make it Ionian. So now I'm like, okay, why would I want to do that? Well, maybe I want to, I'm on, that's the classic maneuver where I'm not in the minor, but I'm in something lighter than the minor. The Dorian, because it has a major 5th modal half step 6 scale degree, it's closer to the major. So if I'm playing something that's kind of minor, but it's got a minor 3rd, but it's like closer to the major. And then I'm going to throw in the Ionian and bring it back to the major. So it's not quite as sad to happy as the traditional thought, although I'm not sure the minor is always just sad. It's kind of like somewhat of a convention. Like I feel like we overstate the fact that it's sad, because you can kind of make the minor happy. I don't feel, or at least not like, I'm not sure it's always sad, really. All right, so that's what we want to do. So I'm like, okay, well, how can I do that? I can find the Aeolian, I can find the Ionian in the current shape, and I'm like, well, if this is the Dorian nodal point 2 continent, the Ionian is right behind it. Is it one one step back or two step backs? Is it a backward note modal half step or a negative modal whole step? Well, it's a modal whole step. Why? Because the formula is always the same, meaning it goes whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half if you do it from the Ionian. Whole, 1 to 2 is always a whole. So if I go back from 2 to 1, it's a whole step back. Well, what? But what if you make that 2 a 1 for scale degree because I'm playing a Dorian scale, and then I go backwards, and then I go like backwards from the 1 back to like the 7th scale degree, or a negative. I guess it would be like a negative scale degree. See how? Why would you do that? That's a stupid question, because like that you made it all confusing if you do that. Why don't you just keep it as a 2? And then you always know that the distance between like a 1 and a 2 or a 2 and a 1 is 2 notes away. Why would you make it a 1 and then memorize like a different formula, but it only goes clockwise and it doesn't go counterclockwise? And then you got to figure out what are you going to do if you go counterclockwise. I'm going to have to figure it out as though I'm going clockwise and then like drop the octave or something like that. No, just keep it as a 2. Just keep it as a 2, and then you can go back, and the distance is between 2 and 1. It's always a whole step, right? Wouldn't that be? I feel like that would be easier. So then because like if this was the Ionian back here, then I could be like, okay, well the Ionian back here, if the second note down from the ceiling is an Ionian, then I'm always leaning forward into what I would call shape number 5, or the Mixolydian shape, or the Ionian A shape. And I can say then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now, if I want to make this one that Ionian, maybe I don't want to change though, because I'm like thinking to myself in Dorian. I'm like minor, dude. I don't want to switch to major, but I just want to throw in a major on top of that Dorian node. I want to like throw in a major all of a sudden and be like, oh, that's bright all of a sudden. It's all pleasant. But then I go back to minor. But then I put a major in there. Major. So if I want to do something like that, then I'm not really thinking of myself changing the key signature. I'd like to say, well, look, I'm just going to put on top of this Dorian node an Ionian shape, like an A major bar shape, por ejemplo. So what would I like to call that? Well, if you just throw an A major shape on top of it, then normally you would have to call it like a D major. But I don't really want to call it a D major, because that doesn't really tell me like what collection of notes am I thinking of myself in. Have I switched the collection of notes in my mind? Or am I like just throwing on like a major on top of it, even though it's outside the collection? It'd be nice to tell someone that. So I'd like to call it something like it's going to be a Dorian / Ionian chord. It's a Dorian / Ionian 2 chord, meaning 2 modal whole steps from the tonic, but I'm going to make the shape as though it's an Ionian shape on top of the Dorian node. That gives me so much more information, because I'm like, dude, I'm just throwing in this nice bright thing on top of the Dorian node, but then I'm going right back to collection of notes on the key of at 4 o'clock. I'm still at 4 o'clock. I'm just throwing that transition in there and then back. Yeah. And so like if I play so could I play this Dorian as though it was Ionian? I could just pretend like that 2 was the 1. That's one way I can see it. Instead of seeing it like how would you have to do that normally? Well, I'm going to pretend that Dorian is like the Ionian, and then I'm going to make it the 1 of the Ionian scale, and then I'm going to play out the Ionian scale by formula. Okay, but most people learn by touch. Wouldn't it be easier if I'm like, okay, that's basically second string down shape number 5 is the Ionian. So what if I just play this as though it was like the second string down? I'm making that note the tonic, And I'm like, so I'm just gonna say that that's like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So I feel like that would be easier to kind of think about, right? Now, if you wanted to change the collection of notes to actually fit that in there, then I'm going to say, okay, that means that if I have my finger on the star of D and I'm going to switch the key signature, then that means that under my star of D, this continent, the planet has to move 2 ticks to the right. So if I'm at 4 o'clock, that's going to get me to 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, boom, 2 ticks to the right. So now that whole thing has shifted up here, and now I'm at 6 o'clock, which is the collection of notes around D major, right? And now 5th fret, 2nd string down, my finger's on the Dorian, which is the Ionian, which would be like the D major, boom, and I'm leaning forward into shape number 5, or the Ionian A shape. Let's bring it back to 4. And let's say, okay, well, what if I don't know by that node? I only know them by the top strings. I only know like my shapes by the top string. So I want to focus on that node, but I only know like the Ionian shape from like the top string. So if I went up to the top string and I was like, okay, that would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So that is playing shape number 4. So anytime the Ionian is on the top string and you're playing through it, you're leaning forward into what I would call shape number 2. So our shape number 2, which would be the Locrian / Ionian shape or the Ionian E shape from a caged system. Could I play this Dorian as though it was the top string of shape number 2? Could I visualize it that way? We could. So I'm just going to say I'm not going to change the whole collection of notes in my mind. I'm just going to like throw in a scale that is going to be the top string of shape number 2. But if I cross the tonic, which I won't do if I only play it one time through, but when I cross the tonic, when I cross the fault line, I'd have to account for the cross to the fault line. But it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So I can kind of see it that way, right? So then why does that work? Well, if I wanted to change the key signature, I can think of it from here. If I happen to know that, I could say that's going to be 1 key down, 1 tick down, which is equivalent to 5 ticks to the right or 7 to the left. I'm going to say 5 ticks to the right minus 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be 5 minus 3, which is 2 ticks to the right. If I'm at 4 o'clock plus 2, that gets us to 6 o'clock again. Now, that means also that if I move 1 tick down, this string is going to cross the fault line down to here. So when it crosses the fault line, this fault line is going to shift everything to the right 1 tick. So automatically. So if I shift this down, it's going to go 1 tick to the right automatically, and then back 1, 2, 3 ticks to the left. So it's going to have a net of 2 ticks to the right, meaning this Ionian is going to end up on fret 7, I believe, if I think about that right. So now I'm going to change this to nodal point 6, but instead of thinking about this shifting this way, I'm thinking about it shifting down and over this way. So 6, boom. So there it is. Now the Ionian's over here, and boom. So now we still have our finger on the star of the string star of D, but now I'm leaning forward into shape number 5, the Mixolydian shape or the Ionian A shape. Okay, so now let's look at what's different. So if I build my chord from the Ionian node, it's a lean forward chord, then this would be like just a normal scale degree chord because this happens to be the 1. It's the Ionian, right? So now I'm going to say, okay, so what's the third of the Ionian? We go 1 modal whole step up. So that's going to be 1 modal whole step is 2 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3. So that's going to give us to the 3. Boom. So that means that nodal, and it's in the ocean right here. Why is it in the ocean? Because I was on nodal point number Dorian. I was on a Dorian, which is right there. That's kind of too close. But I was on a Dorian. So if I was on the Dorian, the related position would be here, right? Let's do it this way. From the Dorian, the related third would be down here. So that means now it's over here. So there's a difference because the Dorian has a short start or a 3-note away minor third. Mixolydian has a 4-note away major third. Okay, So that means that nodal point number 3, which is the Phrygian, is always Ionian's first modal whole step times 2 second modal half step plus 1 third scale degree. And you can see that because, again, if I count that up, it's going to be 1. So if that was 0, if I count from there, 1, 2 modal half steps up. If I make that the tonic third scale degree, if it's 2 modal half steps up divided by 2, that means it's 1 modal whole step up. Okay, so then the distance is going to be a long distance or 4 notes away. I can count that out by saying there's 5 notes between the strings, 10, and then 15 as we go diagonal. Now that 15 could be brought down to the local distance because it's over 12. 15 minus 12 is 5 minus 2, which is 3, and then another 4. So it has a local distance of 4 notes away. That has a local distance of 4 notes away. Okay, so now let's go to the next one. If that's the first modal whole step away, now I build a chord by going to the second modal whole step away. So the second modal whole step is going to be 2 more modal half steps up from 3. So that's going to get us 3, 4, 5 Mixolydian node. So that means that the Mixolydian node is always Ionian's second modal whole step times 2 fourth modal half step plus 1 fifth scale degree. We could see that, of course, by saying that it's out here, right? So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 modal half steps up. If I make that the 1, it's going to be the fifth scale degree, right? And if it's 4 modal half steps up divided by 2 means it's 2 modal whole steps up. Okay, that's why when I build a chord, you could call it a D major chord. I would like to call it an Ionian 2, meaning it's Ionian and then we're going 2 modal whole steps up. The second number's in whole steps, which means just take the stack from there, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, meaning it's going to be Ionian, Phrygian, and Mixolydian, 1, 3, 5. All right. So it has the same relative position here as we saw before with the Dorian, and that's because the distance to the fourth modal half step fifth scale degree is always the same as we measure from every node, except when we measure from the crazy Locrian, which has a short distance instead of a long distance. All right. So boom. So. All right, let's look at it over here. Let's look at it this way. So now we've got our fretboard mapped on top of the planet. We've got fret 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th fret up, first string down. Our fingers on the string star of D, hovering over the continent of Dorian continent. I want to make it Ionian. So it's currently leaning over, we're currently leaning forward into what I would call shape number 1, the Aeolian shape or the Ionian G shape. The Ionian is back here, so that's leaning forward into shape number 5, the Mixolydian shape or the Ionian A shape. I would have to move under my finger the continent shifting 2 ticks to the right. If I'm at 4 o'clock, that would be getting us to 6 o'clock, meaning collection of notes around the key of C to 6 o'clock, the key of D. 2 ticks over, boom. So now my finger hasn't moved from the star of D, string star of D, from the perspective of the yellow, still 5th fret up, first string down, but now leaning forward into shape number 5, Mixolydian shape, or the Ionian A shape, moving it back. We can also say, well, what if I only know it from the top string? We know it from this string. That means anytime the top string is the Ionian, I'm leaning forward into shape number 2, or the Locrian / Ionian shape, or the Ionian E shape. And so I want to move that back here. Could I play then the second string down as though it was the Ionian, as though it was the top string of shape number 2? We could. Why? As long as we account for the kink in the tuning. Why could we do that? Because that would be like shifting this down 1, which is equivalent to either 5 ticks to the right or 7 to the left. If we think about it as 5 to the right, it would be 5, and then minus 1, 2, 3 ticks to the left. 5 minus 3 would be 2, and then 4 o'clock plus 2 would give us to 6 o'clock. if we think about one tick down as -7 plus another 1, 2, 3 gets us to -7, 8, 9, 10, -10, and 12 minus 10 gets us to 2. So once again, 4 o'clock plus 2 gets us to 6 o'clock. So boom, boom. So if I do that, then from the perspective of the yellow, we're going to be 5th fret up, first string down. From once again, lands me on the Mixolydian shape number 5, which you might call the Aeolian A shape. But the red is now showing me that I can visualize that second string down as though it was the top string of shape number 2, or the Ionian E shape, as long as I account for the kink in the tuning, which doesn't happen till down here, right? Till 3's down. Okay, so if I see it this way, now I've got each of the 7 continents and 5 oceans has its own star above it, and we're looking at this particular constellation, where is the constellation of our fretboard, where once again we have the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, on top. That means that the open E is continent number 3, Phrygian continent. Open A, this is at the 4 o'clock, or collection of notes around the key of C. Open A is at continent number, is the open A star of A is hovering over continent 6, which is the Aeolian continent. The open D string star of D is hovering over the continent of Dorian, nodal point 2 continent. The string star of G is hovering over continent 5, which is the Mixolydian continent. The string star of B is hovering over the Locrian continent, continent 7. The string star of E is once again hovering over continent 3, the Phrygian continent. So if this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th fret up, first string down from the ceiling, my finger's on the star of D, which is once again hovering over continent number 2, the Dorian continent, leaning forward into shape number 1, which you might call the Aeolian shape or the Ionian G shape. I want to make that D hovering over the continent of Ionian. How can I do that? Well, I know in the current collection at 4 o'clock, the Ionian is going to be 1 modal half step back, which is 2 notes back. There it is. There's the C. There's the Ionian right now. Anytime the first string down from the ceiling is an Ionian, that means I'm leaning forward into shape number 5, which is the Mixolydian shape or the Ionian A shape. So I want to move that 2 ticks to the right. When I move it 2 ticks to the right, then that means I'm going from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, meaning collection of notes around C to collection of notes around D. That means that the D will be, of course, the Ionian. So I move it 2 ticks to the right, ba-boom. So there we have it. Now from the perspective of the yellow, we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th fret up, first string down from the ceiling. My finger's hovering over the star of D, which is now on continent number 1, the Ionian continent, leaning forward into shape number 5, which you might call the Ionian A shape. All right, let's bring it back. And let's say, okay, what if I only know it from the top shape? So I know it from this C up top at 4 o'clock. And that's going to be anytime the first string, the one closest to the ceiling, is an Ionian. That means I'm leaning forward into shape number 2, the Locrian / Ionian shape, or the Ionian E shape from a caged system. So I want to move that down 1 tick and then back 1, 2, 3 ticks. 1 tick down is equivalent to 5 ticks to the right or 7 to the left. Let's go 5 ticks to the right minus 1, 2, 3 to the left would be a net of 5 minus 3 or 2 to the right. If I'm at 4 o'clock plus 2, that gets me to 6 o'clock. So I'm going to go boom, down 1, over. Okay. So now from the perspective of the yellow, we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th fret up, first string down. My finger's still on the star of D, but now the continent is the Ionian continent. Underneath it, continent number 1, leaning forward into shape number 5, the Mixolydian shape or the Ionian A shape, the red indicating that I can visualize that shape as though it's the top string of shape number 2, Locrian / Ionian shape of the Ionian E shape. Okay. Let's go back on over and just noodle around for a bit. My head is still, I'm still been like a little out of it still, but so let me just noodle around for a bit. Back to this. What was I doing? This is the wrong one. Then now I messed this whole thing up. I thought oh yeah, here, this is the one I was messing with.
Bye.